This video is going to be my reaction to the Lions' 31-9 victory over the Minnesota Vikings in Week 18, finalizing them as the top seed in the NFC, securing home field advantage throughout the playoffs, gaining what I think is a much-needed bye next week to rest players or perhaps get some guys back from injury. If you needed any more evidence as to how unique of a win this is the first time all season that the Vikings offense has been held to single digits, number one. Number two, Minnesota is 14-1 against the rest of the NFL. They dropped the midseason road game to the Rams, I think 30-20, but they're 0-2 against this version of the Detroit Lions. Detroit is just one of the few teams that can stand there and trade with this Vikings defense. One that, really has folded up a number of offenses across the NFL. Like I said, going 14-1 against everybody else. I don't know if you agree or disagree. I wonder if this is the best win of the year for Detroit because of how the defense played in the situation that they're in. Amik Robertson played perhaps as good a game as you could expect. I do think the Lions rolled Kirby Joseph over the top a couple of times to give him help to dissuade Sam Darnold from going in that direction. I only saw that twice on replays, so small sample size. But I'm just trying to figure out, or during the game, I was trying to figure out how or why Darnold wouldn't even try to get him the ball more often. Anyway, Aaron Glenn's defense was incredible throughout, even when the offense struggled in the first half, struggled mightily, in fact, to finish this one off with a 31-9 win, physically beating the Vikings down in the second half. That really hasn't occurred to my knowledge in 2024. Like I said earlier, clinching the top seed in the NFC. Oh, by the way, a second consecutive division round. They blitzed, they attacked, they played a ton of man coverage against a team with two very talented wide receivers in Jefferson and Addison. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. It brought me a lot of joy to see this game turn out the way it did because I recognize that Dan Campbell and the guys on the offensive staff and the defensive side as well probably do some things that are data driven. But there's a part of what Aaron Glenn and his group did on defense tonight that I think is almost a rejection of recognizing your situation. It's almost we're going to do what we have been doing, regardless of who's on the field. And lo and behold, tonight it worked. Granted, it was a home game, one that was, the crowd it sounded amazing, especially with Alex Anzalone making some plays early on. Thought that kind of fired the crowd up, got them energized. For them they took down Sam Darnold. They deconstructed and put him in a grinder. He came into the night 35 touchdowns against 12 interceptions, 68% completion percentage. Aaron Glenn was on fire tonight with coverage calls. They were prepared. He had the guys prepared for every situation. They held Darnold to 18 of 41 passing, 166 yards, and more importantly, perhaps, Jefferson had 3 catches for 54 yards on 9 targets. I don't know about you, I just never would have predicted that type of performance. We saw last year him give the defense significant problems with inferior quarterbacks compared to how Sam Darnold has performed this year. It's a very unique performance in my opinion. One way to look at it is for it to end up 31-9. And at one point it's 7-6 Detroit, with I believe 28 seconds left in the second quarter when they get the ball. Of course, Goff works some magic, gets 2 completions, one to St. Brown, one to Khalif Raymond, to get a field goal that looked kind of important at the time. But what began as a defensive slugfest 30 minutes in, or even 35 minutes in, Goff and company just went off in the third quarter. He did throw a pick in the third quarter. I thought it was a terrible throw before they ripped off 3 consecutive touchdowns to essentially blow the Vikings away. They scored on drives of 70, 59, and 74 yards in 3 consecutive possessions, finishing off the season at 15-2. Historic, I know. For the way that they've accomplished it, I think it almost makes it even more sweet. Who knows what the ending is at this point, but try to allow yourself, I am, as an analyst, someone who watches the game and tries to provide you with observations, content, or different angles of thought that maybe you didn't consider, for them to do this without David Montgomery, for them to do this without all of the guys on the defensive side, I think makes it all the more remarkable. If I heard it correctly, the first ever matchup between two teams in the regular season that each had 14 wins at the time. Jahmyr Gibbs, who I haven't mentioned yet, was the offensive star clearly. 4 touchdowns, 170 yards of offense. It seems like, obviously, with more opportunities, with Montgomery being out, he's producing more. We would expect that, more touches. He's just extremely dangerous every time he touches the football. You don't need to hear that. I don't really need to say it. He popped a 47-yarder that kind of skews a little bit the rushing data. Him and Craig Reynolds finished with 178 on the ground. I thought Sam Laporta was a huge X factor, finding space underneath, over the middle, sometimes to the boundary, basically everywhere. He was 7 catches on 7 targets, and I think all except one were for first downs. Goff did finish 27 of 33 passing, but I didn't think he looked great early on. He didn't look like the Jared Goff that we've witnessed for most of the year. It seemed to me like the longer Goff held the football against this Vikings defense, the more trouble he was exposed to. Bad things seemed to happen the longer he held on to the ball. The interception in the second half, I'm not sure what to think of it. It allowed the Vikings to get the ball right back after Aaron Glenn's defense had stopped Minnesota at the 2-yard line. The Vikings were able to close to 10-9. Thereafter, like I said, Ben Johnson, whatever he was doing, did he change it up? I thought the attack was very horizontal early. A lot of screens, a lot of stuff short and to the outside. Thereafter, they posted those 3 touchdowns to pull away. Really, they were buoyed, I thought, by Amik Robertson, Alex Anzalone, those guys covering, taking away the number 1 route. Kirby Joseph didn't get an opportunity. It looked like to me there was one play in the second quarter where Darnold is looking for something over the middle, like the left hash. I think it's Jefferson. And Kirby Joseph makes a move for it, and so Darnold moves off of it. Another time, on a throw that he got criticized for, I think, by Collinsworth, he's throwing it away from Kirby Joseph. Melifonwu. Melifonwu was making a break on the ball. It's a third down, so he's throwing it behind him intentionally, because if he throws it out in front, it's an interception. I thought the safeties were brilliant. Amik Robertson his timing on challenges. He seemed to know the routes that were coming by Jefferson. So interesting that those guys played against each other in high school and then also in college at least once. About as good a game as you could get from an outside corner, I think. He finished with 5 tackles, 1 pass defense. His overall work tonight clearly was spectacular. I would like to do a film study video on him if I get time. The Lions defense finished with 2 sacks on the night, 10 quarterback hits. They brought pressure from everywhere. It was often on those dual inside linebacker blitzes, kind of a layered stunt. Sometimes they're picking a guard or a center, but sometimes they're just trying to both get through and force the running back to pick one. That gave Darnold problems. It seems like maybe there's some data that Aaron Glenn and the defensive staff had out there that Darnold struggles with pressure up the middle, perhaps. I don't know that for sure. The one thing that is worth mentioning for Aaron Glenn is he didn't let up. They were still blitzing in the fourth quarter when the game was over. They made 3 stops, I think, at or near the goal line. Well, 2 outright stops, and then holding Minnesota to a field goal as well. The one in the second quarter, while they were up 7-0, that was amazing. Now, then again, another one after Goff's first interception, which was a weird play. His first interception. He's trying to flip it to, I think it's Reynolds, and Pace, who's blitzing. He's a fantastic blitzer. Notice they take him out on third downs. I don't think he's that great in pass coverage, to be honest with you. But he makes a great play on a ball that Goff is trying to flip short to Reynolds. The crazy thing is, on the very next snap, Amik Robertson plays it almost too good. He takes away the first route by Justin Jefferson, and then the second route adjustment, he takes that away as well and jumps it. It looked like it very easily could have been an interception. Detroit was able to hold Minnesota to a field goal and keep it at 7-3. That was pivotal because I think it put Minnesota's offense on notice that everything was going to be contested, even targets to their best player. To that point, we're talking about like 6 minutes left in the second quarter. Detroit's offense had really done nothing, but Aaron Glenn's group was just shutting down everything, even when the Vikings got on the doorstep of the end zone multiple times. I think Robertson's perhaps his best play of the night. Well, it's tough to say this because you're covering Justin Jefferson, He's one of the top 2 or 3 wide receivers in the league. His best play of the night might have come on another goal line stand. This was the opening possession of the third quarter. The Vikings were facing a 2nd and goal from the 5, and Jefferson went in motion from left to right. I was looking for them to put him in motion more, try to get him away from Robertson, especially when Terrion Arnold went out. I thought, all right, they're going to motion him across and try to get him over to Kendall Vildor's side. Well, on this particular play, 2nd and goal, Robertson doesn't go with Jefferson. He stays, and the Vikings are trying to throw it to Aaron Jones out in the flats, essentially in the space that Justin Jefferson vacated. Well, Robertson makes first contact, a great challenge. Jones makes the catch. And then Jack Campbell finishes him off, knocks him out of bounds. That was a great play design, I think, by Minnesota, but just great awareness by Robertson. I think Collinsworth handled it. I think Collinsworth covered it well. I usually don't prefer his analysis, to be honest with you, and I certainly don't think it's a huge conflict of interest for all PFF scores to be put on screen for players when he's either part or majority owner in the company, but that's a different topic for a different video. After that 2nd down stop with Robertson and Campbell down on the goal line, or down on the 2, I should say, Darnold had a ton of time on the 4th down pass. They went for it, and he tried to get the ball to Addison late. I think he kind of slid out of the pocket to the right-hand side. Terrion Arnold, who I thought played extremely well tonight, was there to challenge Addison right at the catch point. Maybe he wasn't credited with the pass defense, but he's right there to challenge it. Addison's kind of diving parallel to the ground, and they were unable to get anything accomplished, so Detroit got another stop. Unfortunately, Goff throws the pick on the very next play. We're talking about in the third quarter, Detroit's first possession of the third quarter, in fact. Just an unusual moment, man. The Lions have been attacking horizontal pretty much most of the game, I thought, to that point. And then you just suddenly have this long bomb attempt to Jameson Williams. If it weren't Goff and Ben Johnson's offense, if it was another team, a different jersey color, I would have said it looked like frustration. Just a confusing moment for me to analyze and rationalize for real. Minnesota was able to convert a long field goal there to close to 10-9. So we're talking about 25 minutes of gameplay left in the third quarter. The number 1 seed is up for grabs. Neither offense has been able to hit a gear, 10-9. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, actually 2 of the guys in the Lions Discord kind of predicted it. They said, hey, we've only run 1 play on offense so far. We're going to get things going here in the third quarter, which is really interesting because, if I recall correctly, last year there was such a difficulty for Detroit's offense coming out of halftime in the third quarter almost on a weekly basis. And now they just went off. At the ending, you're talking about 4 consecutive 30-point games in a row for the Lions versus a Brian Flores defense in Minnesota. Feel free to check that and confirm whether that's correct or not. I know it's 2 of them this year. They've scored 31 points twice. This one looks different, obviously, because Goff threw 2 picks. The offense struggled so much early on. So the struggle was real, all right? And then after Minnesota closes to 10-9, you get this 8th possession that I'd like to go over here. Now, the font is a little smaller than normal because it's so many plays, so forgive me for that. But you don't face a 3rd down. Well, there's a 2nd and 20 here after a penalty. I think it's the 7th play down for you guys. You get a 3rd down completion to St. Brown. It's a 3rd and 2 from the 42, about midway down you guys' screen. Completion to St. Brown for 13 yards. I thought that was pivotal, obviously. The 2nd and 4, Gibbs, I thought it was pretty clear that he got it. They called it short and then reviewed it, gave him the 1st down, created the 1st and 10 from the 19-yard line. I think the real play here that opened my eyes was the first play of this drive. It's all the way to the top of you guys' screen, 1st and 10 from the -30. So it's a play action and to Gibbs. And Gibbs then slides out into the left flats. It's versus man, number 44. I think Martelius. I don't exactly know his name or his position. He kind of plays a little bit of a hybrid. They play a sub defense there. I'm kind of interested in the offseason of really doing as much work on a Brian Flores defense as possible, trying to understand some of the things that I'm still a little bit unclear of, why he's got inside linebackers in and out in certain situations. I know why he takes pace out on 3rd down for better coverage. But that one was really cool because it's a play action to Gibbs. It's not a screen, though. He kind of runs a little bit of a flat wheel, and Martelius just can't keep up with it. Goff lofted it over the defender perfectly. Ends up being 9 yards on the play. Also have a completion to Laporta down into the boundary, and then a 17-yarder to Laporta on a 2nd and 20 after the penalty. I thought that one was pivotal. I did not like the screen to Jameson Williams from right around midfield. Then the penalty creates a 2nd and 20. Laporta up the left hash for 17 was awesome. Got him close. I guess maybe technically 18 yards. My notes I'm keeping in live time, so it may not match up in terms of yardage at times. Might be from a different yard line, or oftentimes I will not give the team a line to gain until they've actually got to that specific yard marker. Jameson Williams had a short completion over the middle for 5 yards. Then Gibbs converts on the 2nd and 4. They finally were able to punch this in on the 4th and 2 pass. Look, some of the pass lanes for Goff. The Vikings challenge everything. They contest everything. I do think it's a little bit random sometimes. Like, for example, there was a 4th down earlier in the game, I think 2nd quarter, where Goff has a guy open over the middle. I think it's Jameson Williams, and a random tip by a defensive lineman. So I think there's an element of perhaps a return to the mean at a certain point for this Vikings defense. This doesn't apply to necessarily their games against the Lions, because I think, like I said, the Lions have scored 30 points plus in 4 consecutive games, twice in 2023, twice in 2024. But a lot of the film that I've watched, I'm like, how did that guy tip that ball? It's just very weird, random stuff. It didn't occur on this 4th and 2 from the 10-yard line. Gibbs over the middle. I think he was against Van Ginkel. Not going to be able to match up with him at all. They blitzed an inside linebacker, really vacated the space in the middle of the field. I think that's a route that Gibbs has scored a touchdown on at least 3 times this year, maybe 4. It took the lead from 10-9 to 17-9. I don't know about you at that point. There's a little bit of a feeling like, okay, Goff got in some rhythm. They were able to score. It was a very long drive. It's not like you had to convert 3 or 4 3rd and 5s. I mean, you had a 3rd and 2 that was really created from the penalty 2 plays prior, and then you had the 3rd and 4 where they decided to run the ball. Wasn't really close, and he really pretty much knew, or at least Collinsworth commented, pretty much knew that Ben Johnson and Dan Campbell were going to go for it. And in this case, it worked out, put them up 17-9. The Vikings eventually chose on their next possession to attempt a long field goal down 17-9. That one was interesting to me. It's a 4th and 4 from Detroit's 34. And so attempting the long field goal presumably would get you to 17-12. You could try to win the game, 20-17 with a 2-point conversion later on. The gameplay to that point, I guess, matches up with that decision by their head coach, because it was a defensive struggle to that point. And looking at it now, Monday morning quarterback, or late Sunday night quarterback in this case, we know that Detroit's offense took off and hit a gear that Minnesota couldn't match. Their defense couldn't match, and certainly not their offense. I guess if you had to do it over again, they'd probably go for it. In any case, the field goal goes wide right. And at this point, Goff has got his rhythm. He's the very next possession. This will be their 9th. 14 yards to Gibbs on a completion. 11 to Laporta. Then a 1st down catch by St. Brown, I think, for 12 yards. And then the 3rd and 1 completion to Jameson Williams over the middle. That was clutch. It's down. I think the ball is snapped from the 25, from the Vikings 25. So the 12-yarder gets him inside the red zone. And then the very next snap was revealing to me. I think that Detroit broke Minnesota's defense. And so what I mean by that is I think they put them in so much conflict. It might have been a lot of the horizontal stuff. So maybe the early investment on horizontal plays opened them up, stretched them out a little bit. I don't know. But the very next snap after that conversion to Jameson Williams is this. It's a 1st and 10 from the 13-yard line, and Ben Johnson goes jumbo 13. So you've got Brock Wright, Laporta, and Skipper in the game. Skipper's the tight end on the line of scrimmage to the right, so he can't move. They motion Laporta over, and then post-snap, Brock Wright, who is the fullback, he's lined up at fullback, goes to the left. They pancaked Van Ginkel. Laporta was already into him pretty good, and Gibbs decided to bounce it. And he bounced it behind the lead block of Brock Wright, who got to the outside shoulder, in this case the right shoulder of Van Ginkel. Wright and Laporta just pancaked him, put him into the ground, 13-yard touchdown. Looking at the film of the Vikings defense, are there some things I think other teams could exploit? Yes. Do I think there's some stuff that other teams should look at the Detroit doing and try to attack them with? Certainly. Will the Rams do that? Well, the Rams are the other team to score 30 against them this year, so it looks like there's an opportunity for that. This is a revealing moment, though. I haven't seen too many pancake blocks like that against them. They're usually playing downhill, extremely physical. Really, it's over after this 13-yard touchdown run by Gibbs. It's 24-9, but Dan Campbell still kind of had one highlight reel moment, I guess. Jared Goff, I should say. It's about 5 minutes left, and I think his usage of fourth down plays, his willingness to go for it so much, kind of puts defenses on edge in some ways. Now, look, Detroit's defense had made a stop in the interim, okay? Muhammad had a sack of Darnold just after Branch had a really nicely timed punch out against TJ Hawkinson over the middle. So Minnesota's forced to punt. Gibbs then busts loose on a 47-yarder. So we're talking about 10 minutes left in the game. The celebration for you was probably bubbling at that point or cooking. We knew that it was coming, but it truly became real when Goff and the Lions offense lined up to go for it on a 4th and 2. It's like 5:50 remaining, 5:45 remaining, and they're down on Minnesota's 6-yard line. It's 24-9. It's a 2-score lead. You kick the field goal, right? Well, I think Campbell's willingness to go for it here works in their favor because it's sold, meaning the Vikings accepted, okay, they're actually going to go for it here and not just kick a field goal. You go up 27-9, the game's over. It's a 3-score game, less than 6 minutes to go. There's really nothing that you can do. I certainly wouldn't have lined up. I would just kick it, but I think my suspicion is Goff and company lined up, and they were just trying to draw the Vikings off sides. It worked. It worked perfectly. But I don't think they were really going to snap the ball to try to convert and score. At least actually, I think 2 defenders jumped, and the very next snap, Gibbs punched it in from 4 yards. Well, actually, a better way to describe it would be Gibbs powered to like a 2.5-yard gain, and then he got a little bit of help from his friends. I think a tight end, Laporta, and an offensive lineman helped drive him across for that 4-yard touchdown. That, at that point, 31-9, clearly set off a celebration relief. You have a sweep of the Vikings, who are 14-3 to their own credit. A sweep of the division, in fact, and the number 1 seed. For this team, given the injuries, I think to accomplish this is historic. I know it's historic for the Detroit franchise because of the record. I think it was the Texans game, maybe it was earlier than that, where I started to talk about how unique it was to do what they're doing on defense with so many guys on the field that weren't even on the roster at the beginning of the season. Hell, weren't even on the roster maybe in some cases the week before or 2 weeks before. The blueprint at that time that I talked about was play good to really good defense in the first half, and then let the offense take over since you've presumably got a lead. That was reversed, and it actually wasn't reversed. It was flipped on his head completely. The Lions defense did this without forcing a turnover. Nearly forced a turnover, I think, twice. Robertson with the close call for the interception in the end zone, and then Kendall Vildor punched the ball out from Justin Jefferson. I still think it's borderline a fumble, but they reviewed it and determined that it was an incomplete pass. For Detroit to hold Minnesota to 4.2 yards per play and only 14 first downs. The first time this season that Minnesota's been kept to single digits in terms of offensive points scored. It's not an anomaly. They didn't do this with forcing 3 turnovers, a random fumble, maybe a pick that pops up in the air. This was legit out-scheming, out-coaching, out-efforting a team that wins by playing tough, meaning the Vikings. Detroit, I think, broke this team down and finished them. It kind of I like combat sports references along with basketball ones, but this one's like a combat sports reference. It reminds me of like when a world-class champion fighter, what they do when they face someone who's in the top 10. Meaning they break them, they find a weak spot, 4th or 5th round if it's boxing, 2nd round if it's MMA. They find a weak spot, exploit that weak spot, and then when the other team or the other fighter overcompensates or overreacts, they get to KO. And I think this is as good a win as there is in the NFL this year. I'll name 2 other ones, one of which you're not going to like. The Ravens' Week 4 domination of the Bills sticks out for me because of how large the differential ended up being in the points on the scoreboard and match the gameplay on the field. And then I guess you'd have to say the Buffalo's win in Detroit less than a month ago. For me, I think this win might be the best one that I've seen, that I've witnessed, tried to cover, because the defense is extremely undermanned. And look, it really, if you don't like me talking about that, then just don't listen. Well, we're 25 minutes in, so you are going to listen, but it's reality. The defense is incredibly undermanned. You're not supposed to be able to wipe out 14-2 teams in the NFL with multiple guys on the field who, if everyone's healthy, are on your practice squad. There's no need to be disrespectful about who they are because those guys played their ass off tonight. I think Anzalone's return played a big role. He finished with 7 tackles, 1 pass defense, 1 quarterback hit, very physical with Hawkinson. Hawkinson was 2 of 8 in terms of catches to targets. At this point, I believe that anyone who returns for Detroit's defense provides a huge boost, whether that's Anzalone, Terrion Arnold 2 weeks from now, CD3, I think 3 weeks from now is when he's available, I guess. I think it boosts morale, but also performance, because this Lions team knows how good they are. They know what they're capable of, and I think they've known, really, the guys who've been around this long, they've known since week 1 of the 2023 season when they went into Kansas City and beat the Chiefs. Anzalone's return and a truly special performance by the defense, I don't think are random. I don't think it's happenstance that occurred on the same night. Anyone coming back will have a boost that could cause the defense to play better than we would foresee. For me, it makes it all the more fun at this point to enjoy the Lions going against the grain a little bit. And what I mean by that is decision-making, offensive approach, their defensive coverage choices. I was kind of mentioning it a little bit earlier in this data-driven era. Aaron Glenn, at least tonight, well, every week, Aaron Glenn refuses to compromise. I have Kendall Vildor on the field. I'm still going to play man. I'm still going to force these guys to compete. That's the style he played with, so it doesn't surprise me that that's what he's going to roll with when the times are tough. And it served them well in the face of incredible adversity in 2024. The coaches and players, they haven't wilted, and I think it has allowed them to reach a level of toughness that other teams end up folding against eventually, and that happened to the Vikings tonight. And it happened to a Vikings defense that I don't think anyone would have predicted it, and I'm sure Minnesota fans would not appreciate hearing, but it was reality in the second half. Lions did what they want on offense in the second half. Truly remarkable win. I think the best one of the season for Detroit because of the opponent, how good the Minnesota Vikings are, how capable the defense is of making plays. You got some glimpses of that tonight, unfortunately. And then also the situation to be able to gain a week off and have home field advantage, meaning someone's going to have to come to Detroit and beat them. And regardless of who the hell they roll out there on defense, it looks like Aaron Glenn's going to have those guys prepared for war. Appreciate you guys' time, man. If you enjoyed this reaction video, albeit a very late one, please let me know in the comments section, number 1. Number 2, if you think other Lions fans would enjoy my thoughts on the matter, how they were able to pull away for a 31-9 victory, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.